My name is Willa. I'm 29 years old. 2 months ago, I stood in the reception hall of the Ashford Country Club, surrounded by 200 of my in-laws' closest friends and colleagues, and listened to my mother-in-law tap her champagne flute and say, into a working microphone, "We're just so grateful Nathan found someone who keeps a lovely home, even if the rest of us can't quite figure out what it is she does all day." The laughter was polite. The kind that's worse than mean laughter because everyone pretends it didn't happen. My husband was across the room. He heard it. He set down his drink very slowly, the way he does when he's decided something, and I watched him straighten his jacket and start walking toward the microphone. I need to back up. Before I tell you what happened that night, I want to ask, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know who's out there listening to this. I met Nathan at the county hospital. Not romantically, not at first. I was a home health aide assigned to his grandmother Vera, who was recovering from hip surgery, and who absolutely did not want to be in a facility. She wanted to go home. She wanted her own bed, and her own terrible daytime television, and someone who would make her tea the way she liked it, which was far too strong, and with exactly 1 cube of sugar. Not a spoon. A cube. I was 24. I'd been doing home health work for 2 years by then, after finishing my CNA certification and deciding I wasn't ready for a hospital floor. I liked the one-on-one. I liked actually knowing my patients. Nathan came by every Sunday to check on her. The first time we met, he barely looked at me. Polite, distracted, clearly had somewhere else to be. He thanked me for taking care of Vera and left. I didn't think about him again until the third Sunday, when Vera told me, without prompting, that her grandson worked in research and that he was terrible at talking to people he found interesting. "He finds you interesting," she said, not looking up from her crossword. "He barely spoke to me," I said. "Exactly." We dated for a year before I met his parents. Nathan had been quiet about them in a way that felt intentional. When I finally asked, he said, "They're a lot. I wanted you to know me first." I appreciated that. I also should have taken it as a warning. His parents. His father ran a commercial real estate firm. His mother chaired 3 charity boards and lunched with people whose names I recognized from buildings. Had one daughter, Nathan's older sister Petra, who had followed their father into the business and who wore the kind of effortless confidence that I now understand is just lifelong validation made visible. And then there was Nathan, their brilliant son who had gone sideways into research instead of business. They were proud of him in the abstract, the way you're proud of a painting you don't quite understand. As for me, well, I was the girlfriend who wiped old people clean and held their hands while they talked about dead husbands. That's not how they said it. They never said it directly. They never do. The first Christmas, his mother asked me to tell everyone what I did. I explained home health care, the difference between aides and nurses, why the work mattered, especially for elderly patients who couldn't afford long-term facilities. She nodded with her chin tilted slightly down, the nod that means I am waiting for you to finish. Then she turned to Petra and asked about the Whitmore acquisition, and the whole table leaned in like she'd just started telling a ghost story. That was sign 1. Sign 2 came the following Easter. I'd been with Nathan for almost 2 years by then. His grandmother had recovered fully and didn't need me anymore, but Vera and I had kept up. She came to Easter dinner. At some point she said to his mother, "You know Willa handled Mrs. Kowalski's entire end-of-life transition last fall. The family said they couldn't have managed without her." His mother said, "How lovely," and reached for the bread basket. Nathan saw my face. He squeezed my hand under the table. Sign 3 was the engagement party. His parents hosted it at their house, which was the kind of house where you're afraid to put your glass down anywhere. His mother had made a seating chart. I found out from Petra that she'd originally seated my own mother, my mother, who drove 4 hours to be there, at the far end of the secondary table, near the door to the kitchen, because we needed to fit the alderman couple near the host seats. Nathan moved the cards himself, quietly, before anyone arrived. He didn't tell me until later. I found out because my mother mentioned how warm it had been to sit near the center of things. When Nathan proposed for real, 3 weeks later, in the apartment we shared, I cried for a long time. Not just because I was happy, because I was relieved. Because somewhere underneath all of it, I had been afraid that he might eventually see me the way his family did, as someone adjacent to real life, someone useful, but not quite serious. He held my face in his hands and said, "You are the most serious person I know." We got married in a small ceremony, just close family, 30 people. His parents were gracious that day. I remember being surprised. The country club event was different. It was their event, a fundraising dinner his mother organized every year for a children's hospital foundation. It was 200 guests, formal. And this year it coincided with a business announcement his father was making about the firm's new development project. Nathan and I were invited as family, which meant we were there to be seen, not heard. Nathan's mother called the week before. She had a particular tone for calls like this, warm on the surface, instructions underneath. "We're seating you with the Hargrove couple," she said. "They're lovely. He's in insurance. You'll have plenty to talk about." The Hargroves were not unpleasant. They were exactly as described. Lovely, in insurance, at a table toward the back of the room, far enough from the podium that the audio was slightly delayed. I watched the centerpiece all evening, while the speeches echoed faintly over us. I'd worn a dress I loved. Dark green, simple. Nathan's mother had called 2 days before to ask if I was planning to dress up a bit. I told her I had something nice. There was a pause. "Petra's wearing the Marchesa," she said. "That's great," I said. "I'll be in green." When we arrived, Nathan's mother air-kissed me and said before I could say hello, "Oh, you wore the green. Interesting choice." Then she pivoted to the couple behind us and lit up like a lamp. Nathan put his hand on my back. "Don't," I said quietly. "I'm fine." I wasn't fine, but I was practiced. We found our table. The Hargroves were already there, mid-conversation. Nathan poured water for both of us, and I sat and looked at the room and tried to remember why I had agreed to come. At the table directly to my left, close enough to overhear, sat a woman I didn't know. Dark blazer, reading glasses pushed up on her head, talking quietly on her phone. She glanced at Nathan once and then looked away. Petra stopped by our table before dinner. She had champagne and that way she had of standing that made it clear she was doing you a favor by stopping. "Willa." She smiled. "How's the work? Still doing the home visits? Still doing the work, yes? That's great. So important." She said important the way people say exotic, meaning foreign to them, meaning beneath consideration. "Nathan, Dad wants to talk to you before the remarks. Something about the Caldwell numbers." Nathan looked at me. "Go," I said. "I'm fine." He went. Petra followed. I sat with the Hargroves, who were kind and asked me genuine questions, and with whom I had a perfectly pleasant conversation about their Labrador and their house in Maine. I held on to that. I focused on that. His father's remarks were first. Firm update, project announcement, the usual language of ambition dressed up as community investment. He was good at it. He had the voice for it. Then Nathan's mother took the microphone. She thanked the donors. She thanked the board. She talked about the Children's Hospital Foundation with genuine warmth. And I believed that warmth was real. She cared about that work, I think, in the way people care about things that reflect well on them. She introduced Nathan, who was seated at the family table by then, and said he was doing brilliant research and that she couldn't always explain what it was, but she knew it mattered. Light laughter, affectionate. Then she said, "And of course, Nathan's wife is here, Willa." She found me in the crowd, a small pause, the kind that's calculated. "We're just so grateful Nathan found someone who keeps a lovely home, even if the rest of us can't quite figure out what it is she does all day." The laughter was polite, scattered. Some people looked at me. Some people looked away, which was worse. I sat completely still. I felt the Hargrove wife touch my arm briefly, just a brush, like she was checking if I was there. Nathan's chair was empty by the time I looked over. He was already walking. He moved through the tables the way he moves when he's thought something through, and reached a conclusion. Deliberate, unhurried, taking up exactly the space he needed. A few people turned to watch. His mother saw him from the podium. Something shifted in her expression. "Nathan, sweetheart, may I say something?" He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped up beside her. She had no graceful way to refuse him in front of 200 people. She stepped back. Nathan looked out at the room. He didn't look nervous. He looked like himself, quiet, certain, exactly as serious as he always was. "I want to introduce my wife properly," he said, since the introduction she'd just received wasn't quite accurate. A hush. Willa is a home health aide and a certified nursing assistant. She has been doing that work for 6 years. In those 6 years, she has cared for more than 40 patients, most of them elderly, most of them navigating the end of their lives or recovering from something that tried to end them early. She has sat with people through their worst nights. She has managed pain protocols, coordinated with physicians, translated medical language for families who were too frightened to ask questions. She has been the difference, more than once, between someone dying in a facility surrounded by strangers and someone dying at home, in their own bed, with someone holding their hand. He paused. That is what she does all day. The room was absolutely still. I felt heat behind my eyes and refused it. Last year, Nathan continued, one of Willa's patients was a 73-year-old woman named Vera. He looked directly at his grandmother, who was at the family table, whose expression I could not read from where I sat. My grandmother. Willa cared for her for 4 months after her hip replacement. During those 4 months, I watched my grandmother go from someone who was frightened and in pain to someone who was herself again. That didn't happen because of a facility or a system. It happened because of one person who showed up every day and paid attention. He looked at his mother. "Willa doesn't keep a lovely home," he said. "She keeps people alive." There is a difference. Someone at a table near the front started clapping. Not enthusiastically. Just one person, steady, like a signal. Then another. Then the room. His mother stood to the side of the podium with her hands clasped and her face composed, and her eyes doing something I had never seen them do before. I stood up. I wasn't sure I was going to, but my legs decided for me. I walked to the microphone. Nathan moved back slightly, creating space, but he didn't go anywhere. He stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. 200 faces. I had spent 6 years being invisible in rooms like this. I had learned to manage it, to perform fine, to eat my dinner and thank the hosts and go home and feel the weight of it later, quietly, where it couldn't cost me anything. I was done with that. "I'm Willa," I said. My voice came out steady. I was surprised. I've been Nathan's wife for almost 2 years and his partner for 5. In that time, I've sat at a lot of tables where I wasn't quite the right kind of person. I've had my work described as sweet, as nice, as good for me, as something I'd probably move on from eventually. I paused. I'm not going to move on from it. It is not a placeholder. It is not what I do until I figure out something more impressive. I looked at Nathan's mother. She was still composed. I had to hand it to her. I take care of people who are scared. I take care of people who have been told by systems and schedules and insurance paperwork that they are no longer worth the inconvenience. I show up in the morning and I sit with them and I make them tea and I check their vitals and I hold their hand when the night gets bad. I do it because it matters, not because it pays well, not because it gets me into rooms like this one, but because somewhere out there right now there is someone who is frightened and in pain, and they need a person to show up. I let that sit for a second. I'd appreciate being treated like that's worth something. The clapping started again. More of it this time. Nathan's mother stepped forward. Her voice was quieter than I expected. "Willa, I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," I said. Not unkindly, just clearly. And now you know what I meant. I stepped back from the microphone. Nathan took my hand and we walked back to our table together. The Hargrove wife was crying, which I hadn't expected, and her husband was looking at his water glass with the concentrated attention of a man trying not to join her. We didn't stay for dessert. In the car, Nathan drove and I sat with my hands in my lap watching the highway lights slide past. I felt hollowed out in a way that wasn't bad exactly. Like something had been living in my chest for years, something tense and braced and waiting, and it had finally unclenched. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I think so." I turned to look at him. "Were you planning that?" "Not exactly." He kept his eyes on the road. I knew at some point I was going to stop being quiet about it. Tonight felt like the point. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He said it simply, without drama. "I really did." My phone started going. I didn't look at it for a long time. When I finally did, there were messages from his sister, from his father, from 3 numbers I didn't recognize. There was one from Vera, which just said, "Good girl. Both of you." I put the phone face down on my lap and looked out the window and didn't say anything for a while. The strange part was the aftermath. I had expected Nathan's mother to be cold afterward, maybe permanently. I prepared myself for that. What I hadn't prepared for was the phone call 4 days later from the woman in the dark blazer who'd been sitting at the table next to us. Her name was Dr. Braster, Ingrid Marsh. She was the Director of Community Health Partnerships at the county hospital system. She had been at the dinner as a donor guest, and she had apparently spent the 2 days following it doing some thinking. She wanted to meet with me. We had coffee at a place near the hospital. She was direct and asked good questions, and she told me she'd been working for 2 years on a pilot program to expand home health access in underserved neighborhoods, and that the program had funding but was struggling to find experienced coordinators who actually understood the work from the inside. She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. "Read the first page. Then the second." I looked up. "This is a real job," I said. She looked at me like that was a strange thing to say. "Of course it is." It was a real job. Lead care coordinator for a 12-person home health team, with a mandate to develop training materials and family communication protocols. It was more money than I'd made in 3 years combined. It was also exactly what I'd been doing informally for the better part of my career, just without the title. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for 48 hours. Then I called her back and said yes. I haven't told Nathan's parents about the new position yet. Not because I'm hiding it. Nathan knows, Vera knows, my mother cried on the phone for 10 minutes, but because I'm not interested in the version of respect that only shows up after a job title changes. I've been doing this work for 6 years. The work didn't change. I changed. I stopped waiting for permission to take up space. Nathan's mother sent a card about a week after the dinner. Handwritten, which I gave her credit for. It said she was sorry if her remarks had landed the wrong way, and that she hoped we could all move forward. Not an apology exactly, but something. I sent a card back. I said I hoped so too. I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven everything. There's a lot I'm still sitting with, but because I'm finished performing bitterness as much as I was finished performing fine. Neither one is honest. What I know now is that the people who love you don't ask you to explain your worth. They don't require a credential or a salary bracket or a moment of public vindication before they treat you like you matter. Nathan never required any of that. For 5 years he came home to someone who smelled like antiseptic and hospital and the residue of other people's hard days. And he asked me how it went. And he listened. And he remembered the names of my patients and asked about them by name. That is not a small thing. I spent a long time thinking it wasn't enough, that his family's dismissal was somehow more real than his belief in me. It took a microphone and 200 witnesses for me to understand that I had been giving the wrong people the authority to define me. I still work with patients directly. The coordinator role doesn't take me out of the field entirely, and I didn't want it to. There's a woman I see on Tuesdays, 81 years old, who has macular degeneration, and who is slowly losing her vision, and who is frightened in a way she is too dignified to say plainly. I sit with her for 2 hours every Tuesday. We do a puzzle, the large piece kind. And she tells me about her late husband who is a jazz musician, and I tell her about Nathan, and she laughs at the right moments and asks good follow-up questions, and is, frankly, a better conversationalist than most people I meet at country clubs. Last Tuesday, she held my hand for a moment before I left. Didn't say anything, just held it. That is also not a small thing. Nathan and I talked about the whole dinner, really talked about it. One night a few weeks later, we were sitting on the kitchen floor for some reason, eating cereal at 11 at night, which is one of our habits that makes absolutely no sense and that I love. Do you think they'll change? I asked. He thought about it, which I appreciated. He didn't reach for reassurance. I think my mother is capable of it, he said finally. I think she doesn't always know what she's doing is harmful. I also think that's not an excuse, it's just a starting place. And your father? My father respects outcomes, he said. He'll come around when he understands what you've built. I'm not building it for him. I know. He bumped his shoulder against mine. I know you're not. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen quiet, the building settling around us. I keep thinking about something, I said. Tell me. All those dinners. All those holidays where I sat and absorbed it and went home and felt small. I pulled my knees up. I kept thinking the problem was me, that if I just proved myself enough, found the right words, they would see it. And the whole time the problem wasn't me. Nathan set down his bowl. No, he said, it wasn't. I wasted a lot of energy on that. You did. He didn't soften it. You also spent that same energy taking care of 40 people. You didn't waste all of it. I thought about that for a long time afterward. I want to be clear about something because I've seen the comments some of you leave on videos like this, and I understand the impulse. I'm not telling this story because my husband turned out to be right or important, or because it was ultimately revealed that I wasn't as small as they thought. I'm telling it because for 5 years I treated their opinion of me as though it had weight, as though being dismissed by people who only measure value in square footage and business connections was a verdict on something real. It wasn't. It was just noise. The moment that actually changed me wasn't Nathan at the microphone. It was me, stepping up after him, looking out at 200 people who didn't know me from anyone, and saying, this is what I do, and this is why it matters, and I would like to be treated accordingly. I didn't need them to understand. I needed to stop needing them to. I still show up every Tuesday. The puzzles have gotten harder. My patient has been requesting the 750-piece ones lately, which I suspect is partly to keep me there longer, and partly because she has a competitive streak she's never bothered to hide. Last week, she asked me how Nathan's family was. I told her it was complicated and getting better, slowly. She handed me a puzzle piece. Most things worth fixing are slow, she said. She found her section of the puzzle. I found mine. We worked quietly for a while. I think I'm going to be okay. I've been thinking that for a couple of months now, every time I let myself sit still enough to feel it. This time, I believe it. Thank you for being here until the end. If you've ever had someone reduce your work to a punchline at a dinner table, or anywhere, I want you to know that the verdict wasn't theirs to give. Like and subscribe if this stayed with you, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up for your own worth in front of people who were supposed to already know it? I'd really like to hear your story. I've been thinking a lot about what it costs to stay quiet. Not the dramatic kind of quiet. Not silence in a crisis. Not choosing your moment. I mean the slow, practiced quiet that becomes a habit. The kind where you learn to absorb something small and sharp, smile over it, and keep eating your dinner. I did that for 5 years. I got very good at it, and for a long time I told myself it was maturity, that I was above it, that engaging would only make things worse. What I understand now is that it wasn't maturity. It was fear dressed up as grace. There's a cause and effect chain I didn't see clearly until after the gala. Every time I absorbed a dismissal without answering it, I was teaching the people around me that the dismissal had landed cleanly, that I'd accepted it, that we could all move on. And we did move on, to the next dinner, the next holiday, the next event where my worth was quietly measured and found insufficient. My silence wasn't keeping the peace, it was writing permission slips. What Nathan did that night wasn't just defend me. He interrupted the chain. He stepped into a room where a story about me had been told for years. Quiet Willa. Sweet Willa. Willa who keeps a nice home but isn't quite serious. And he said, out loud, in front of the people who'd authored that story, that's not accurate. Here is what's accurate. And the thing about accuracy, when it's delivered calmly and with full eye contact, is that it doesn't leave a lot of room for the other version to survive. But I need to be honest about something. Nathan's moment at the microphone mattered. It mattered deeply, and I don't want to minimize it, and it also was not the thing that changed me. What changed me was the 30 seconds after, when I stood up. When I walked to that microphone myself. When I looked at 200 people I didn't know and said, this is what I do and it is worth something. Nathan opened the door, I walked through it. And those are two different acts. And both of them were necessary. The intelligence part of that night wasn't knowing what to say. It was finally understanding that the problem was never mine to solve through better performance. I had spent 5 years trying to prove something to people who had already decided what they believed. You can't reason someone into respecting you when disrespect is serving a function for them, when it helps them feel the order of things is correct, that their definitions of value are accurate. The only thing that disrupts that is refusing to participate in the story. The courage part was simpler and harder at the same time. It was just standing up, literally, physically, standing up from that table and walking toward the thing that frightened me, which was being seen clearly, which was saying out loud what I actually believed about my own work. I had never done that before. I had always let someone else carry the sentence for me, or let it go unsaid. I think about Vera holding my hand before I leave on Tuesdays. I think about what that wordless moment holds. All the nights I showed up when it was hard. All the mornings I made the tea exactly right. All the times I stayed a little longer because she needed company more than she needed a vitals check. None of that required anyone's approval to be real. It was real before the gala. It was real before Nathan said a word. That's the thing I keep coming back to. The work doesn't change when someone finally names it correctly. You just stop flinching when people don't.